You notice the soil here is like super dark, and that is because, in addition to being surrounded by rebel groups, Goma also sits on at the base of an active volcano, and that's erupted a couple times in the last 20 years, kicking off, its own wave of refugee problems to compound the shit that regularly goes down here. Even from like the land up, this area is just in a constant state of basically trying to kill everybody. That woman's shirt says Vagina Warrior.
Goma is the capital city of the North Kivu province of the Democratic Republic of Congo and is situated in one of the world's worst geopolitical neighborhoods. To the southeast, there's the Rwandan border, which largely consists of mountain jungles through which scores of Hutu militants passed in the wake of the 1994 Rwandan genocide, fleeing the revenge of President Paul Kagame's newly elected Tutsi government for their role in the massacre. This armed migration directly contributed to the escalation of the First and Second Congo Wars, in which an estimated 5 million people lost their lives. It was also through this transportation corridor that the Lord's Resistance Army, led by the infamous Joseph Kony, crossed the border from Uganda and drove deep into the heart of the Congo. While Kony 2012 drew a lot of criticism for being less than diligent when it came to framing the quote-unquote facts the documentary cited, what it did reveal is that the best way to reach jungle-bound dissidents wasn't through social media, but through good old-fashioned psychological operations, mostly in the tried-and-true forms of leaflet drops and radio broadcasts.
We don't benefit anything if we lie to you. We want to make sure you see the facts. And I'm sure you're going to decide to enter the DDR process voluntarily.
So when the United Nations extended an invitation to embed with their operation in several locations across the country, our team gladly accepted.
DDR is the Disarmament, Demobilization, Repatriation, Reinsertion, and Reintegration Program. The focus of the program is on foreign combatants that are operating in the Congo. There's national reintegration programs which take over and facilitate their reinsertion into their communities of origin. The main approach that DDRRR has for trying to convince voluntary surrenders for subsequent repatriation is by radio sensitization. This involves using radio messages over FM networks.
FM Uruguay, 106.7. Siempre presente, only the hits. All rock, no talk.
Montevideo, vamos adelante.
There's messages calling for them to lay down their weapons and return home. It lets them know that it is still possible to go home. Hope is not lost. Their families will be waiting for them. And there's programs that will help them reinsert into their society.
This is one of our camps, the transit camp. And in this camp, we feed them 3 times a day. We provide them lodging, not the best one that you may think about, because we want to keep them temporarily so that they can go back to their country. We also give them access to telephone so that they can call their friends, relatives, and loved ones.
Iyo abahoze ari abakombata bageze mu kigo cy'Imutobo bamaramo amezi 2 bahabwa amahugurwa n'inyigisho zabafasha gutangira neza ubuzima bwa gisivili.
How is this?
Now, I would like to invite Mr. Hervé Hess to address the ceremony.
Oh, that's cool. I guess it's supposed to be supposed to represent like peace of some sort, but it kind of looks like one of those like evil warbirds from Pink Floyd's The Wall. So we're at a MONUSCO
base far eastern side, like right on the border with Rwanda and Uganda. There's a whole bunch of rebel groups that kind of mix and merge and cross borders and take over this place. It's a real mess. The one most people know about, the Lord's Resistance Army, or LRA, are kind of the most notorious for their tactics, for using child soldiers, for abducting people, for setting entire churches full of folks on fire. There's another group called the M23, and are actually like officially about like 20 or 40 kilometers outside the city center, but we've heard like closer to 10. You know, these wars have been going on since the 90s in different little spurts. It's basically a permanent state of war for the Congolese people. It just varies who they're fighting at any one given time of the day. And so we're gonna go with a little patrol, hopefully not get shot at.
Y van a ir acá en estos 4 vehículos y eso.
We got into Goma this morning. We just hooked up with a group of Uruguayan UN soldiers who are going to give us a little tour of the city. See what a town that's basically spent 20 years at siege of rebel warfare looks like.
Besides the fragmented Lord's Resistance Army, the Democratic Republic of Congo is also home to militant groups such as the Mai Mai, the Raya Matumboki, and the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda. But the greatest threat to regional stability could very well be a group known as M23. Led by Bosco Ntaganda, affectionately known by his troops as the Terminator, M23 mostly consists of Congolese Tutsis who defected from the army last April after alleging that the government in Kinshasa had violated peace accords signed on March 23, 2009, in which members of the now-defunct CNDP were to be absorbed into the country's regular army, the FRDC. The battle between M23 and government troops has raged so wildly that the United Nations has been forced to divert troops and resources sorely needed elsewhere in the country in order to give the government in Kinshasa a fighting chance. This in turn has created a security vacuum in which many of the armed groups in the area have rushed in to fill, while reigniting the cycle of old tribal conflicts that were never really stamped out in the first place. These ethnic and geopolitical tensions are in turn exacerbating an already raging fight between local militias to control the illicit mining of cassiterite, wolframite, and coltan, minerals essential to the manufacturing of everything from smartphones to jet engines to airbags. Complicating matters further, it is widely believed that M23 is receiving aid from the governments of Rwanda and Uganda, and it has been reported that the FDRC has approached the Hutu Mai Mai for aid in fighting the largely Tutsi M23. Background information largely omitted when President Obama ordered 100 U.S. Special Forces to support regional powers in their search for our favorite madman of Facebook.
And when the Lord's Resistance Army, led by Joseph Kony, continued its atrocities in Central Africa, I ordered a small number of American advisors to help Uganda and its neighbors pursue the LRA.
So, I'm not a big fan of the UN in general. The track record has been spotty for all the 65, 67 years. Seem to cause as many problems as they solve or attempt to solve, and they're famous for bringing the sex trade basically anywhere they set up shop. At the same time, you're a place with like the Congo, where even the national armies aren't like one unified force. They're fighting all these different rebel groups. You kind of need like a supervising authority to kind of keep everything straight and try to keep all sides like playing nicely with one another.
As our team's tank patrol policed the streets of Goma's poorest neighborhoods, as well as power plants, airstrips, and crossroads, the kind of places a rebel army would likely attack, it became clear that UN troops were not preparing for a jungle assault, but for a potential attack by M23 on Goma itself.
So obviously the UN's here in what they describe as, peacekeeping mission. They're supposed to, mediate between all the different rebel groups and the factions of army. There's, different sections of the Congolese army, the Rwandan army, and the Ugandan armies do come in here. So UN's supposed to be basically the babysitter, the grown-ups here. At the same time, they're, you're in a tank and they're soldiers. Like, little boys like it, but it just kind of feel a little weird, like you're in an occupying army. Can't help but notice we've only really been in town, and it's kind of weird to just do a city patrol. It's almost like more like you're policing the local population than on the lookout for rebel groups. I mean, maybe there's something to be said for trying to convince locals not to go take up arms with M23.
In the weeks that followed our initial visit to Goma, skirmishes between M23, Congolese troops, and the UN increased with regularity at strategic locations surrounding the city, with rebels even beginning to attack food, fuel, and supply convoys into town.
One thing I never considered when riding in these APCs, you always see the dudes up top with the guns, think that's the cool seat, but it's fucking hell on your kidneys. Like everything, this whole ring is just like, it's just like a series of gut and kidney punches every time you slow down or speed up or hit a piece of old lava, which is every minute.
Later, the UN invited our team to visit a camp in Goma, set up to house rebel combatants who had recently surrendered to both the UN and FDRC.
When escapees do come out, they're typically, at the moment, received by a community member that they perhaps cross in the road or in the jungle on a route or something like that, and brought to the FRDC or to our military camp, where they'll be kept in our transit camp for maximum a week, within which time they'll be processed in terms of getting their information details, start doing the tracing for their families. We make contact with the Amnesty Commission in Uganda, and our counterparts in Entebbe, Kampala will meet us at the airport, and we'll do a handover, after which they'll be reintegrated via whatever systems Uganda has in place.
Ubutumwa nshobora kuboherereza uyu mwanya ndahera ku bategarugori. Bategarugori rwose hari mwari amashyamba bafite ibibazo.
From the women that have been abducted and kept as bushwives, oftentimes the reason that they're released is because they've been slowing down the LRA group that they're associated with, and so the fighters in the group made the decision that for the purposes of allowing them to be more rapid moving, they'll release these women and children.
Now, when you say bushwives, that's a polite way of saying like sex slave, basically.
Yeah. These are women that have been abducted and used for sex as porters. All these most negative kind of uses that you could in the bush.
Built on the ruins of a home previously belonging to deposed Congolese dictator Joseph Mobutu, the camp was split along ethnic and administrative lines, with only a chain-link fence separating Hutu and Tutsi fighters, who out in the bush had been spilling each other's blood by the bucket for decades. The camp in Goma is indicative of the DRC's confusing geopolitical turmoil. Combatants staying at the camp must first surrender and hand over their weapons to UN or government troops, after which they are processed and held for 72 hours. A portion of the residents are from Rwanda, from which they fled to the DRC, joined a militia, became hired guns, and now want to return home. Other campers are Congolese who fought with local Hutu and Tutsi militias before surrendering. But there is also a contingent of Rwandan farmers who pose as ex-rebels in order to hitch a free ride with the UN back across the border. To determine their status and surmise their identities and countries of origin, they're quizzed on local facts and subjected to fingerprinting and retinal scans. The camp is an element of a UN program designed to transform rebels into civilians, reintegrating them back into society, or what's left of it. As the camp's public information officer, Sam Howard, gave us a walking tour of the side of the camp where some M23 fighters were housed, it became apparent that no one from the UN wanted to talk to our team about the confusing three-way battle raging between the M23 mutineers, the UN, and the FDRC. They were, however, more than happy to discuss other armed groups that are now less active, such as Joseph Kony and his LRA fighters, just not the real rebels standing next to us. The crumbling security situation in North Kivu has forced the hand of the UN and sparked a massive reallocation of UN assets to Goma from places like Dungu, Duru, and Bengadi in the Oriental province, places where the LRA were and to some degree still are active.
central government involvement, there's not much actually, maybe because there's a little of resources available from central government. There's not much, really, there's not much.
The village of Dungu sits beside the quiet Yuli River. The ruin of a Belgian colonial castle faces the Kabali hydroelectric power plant, which has been defunct for nearly 3 decades now. Beginning in September 2008, the Lord's Resistance Army launched a series of brutal attacks in Dungu, kidnapping dozens, killing hundreds, and displacing an estimated 87,000 people. In an unusual display of brutality, the LRA fighters put aside their usual AK-47s and RPGs in favor of the machete and club. This brutality is still being felt in the damage to the area's already fragile infrastructure, and with no standing power grid or mobile phone network, the only reliable method of mass communication are the FM radio transmitters made available by the UN's DDR-RR program.
Na musique kitoko mingi kakuta na studio na biso ya DD 3h de la Monisco ana kati ya mboka Dungu. Tuza kolanda makoma aza kopesa musique na ya kitoko mingi.
This is our mobile radio for sensitization, mainly for ex-combatants in the area where we are. We have one here, one is at Bangadi.
Alors, à partir de ces documents qui portent sa photo, on part avec l'hélicoptère en brousse et puis on déplie comme ça. On est en train de larguer partout en brousse.
Our team first saw examples of the UN PSYOPs flyers with Sam Howard back at the transit camp in Goma. Each contained instructions in several languages directing LRA and other rebel combatants on the correct procedure for safely surrendering for repatriation. First, if you find a flyer, look for the correct FM radio station to tune into for instructions of where you can surrender. Next, when the LRA goes to bed, make your escape under the cover of darkness. Third, surrender to the UN, FDRC, or another approved African Union force. And finally, you will be reunited with your strangely Asian-looking family.
The mobile radio is basically for coming home message.
Yeah, it's all just LRA, right? That's the dominant group.
Yeah, that's the only area. That area is mainly LRA areas, like where the LRA operate,
Right.
Bangadi, Duru, and it's a very hard, difficult for them to basically move from one area to area. So because most of the rivers are already, overflooded, are full. Even the attacks they carry out is only for looting food and having some medicine, Most of them, especially the soldiers, they're willing to surrender, but always they have the fears. If they're reassured that they will be safe home, I'm sure most of them will come.
Or just leave the woods.
Yeah, and also they are really misled by their commanders. They will tell them, oh guys, if you surrender and you go home, you will be killed and that kind of stuff.
Dog boy won't jump cannon or wang my bird with Ducachel, the Carmelach. Ye lake at yellow my won't jump cannon, Puru don't yen. Do I leg a attack? Ni, she be in my tailum, a Lego yen. Tama, you peer can if Yanka, Waja, and in a baby, she one you been come a lane. Where you know your quarrel. Comme quelqu'un non est béron et parent bertier ina ye nan ke wen hana o nge koma o gang bon mam na ke buma be ano putie ma ko joma wano ber ko gine mo we ko wa cha le ho mama na chi o wa cha ne an puri ko puri to ko chi ini bin inen yubi itim gina ngo mano be bi in Kijo gangu mangan ma pitutono ko ber mana wachi wu en ket mo maraj peke in ngat mai ti lumiti ka winyo an o ma be me nyuto ne tie in bene ikwan yo me woti me bieno wek bene o ma be ket ma ana oni dok bene nyang lu wot mo kene.
Alors, moi je pense que si ils pouvaient nous contacter, ils pouvaient leur dire clairement la difficulté que nous avons avec ces gens. Parce que vous voyez, ce sont des gens qui ont passé beaucoup de temps avec les rebelles en bourse. Donc quand il revient, sa mentalité ne peut pas changer directement.
Alors, c'est vraiment la peur qui le maintient en bourse.
The question just was, have their communities been affected by the LRA before working with DDR, or just how have they been affected? Like,
of course, they've been affected. I mean,
c'est-à-dire, à l'attendre parler, c'est comme s'il ne comprend pas bien ces phénomènes-là. Comme il connaît bien les phénomènes, est-ce qu'il connaît que la LRA était à Domo-Centre ici? Traverser les ponts, là où il est venu de l'aéroport, traverser les ponts ici, tuer les gens et puis kidnapper et aller en brousse. Est-ce qu'il connaît que cela a été comme ça?
Whatever happened and whatever they've been doing, everybody is ready to forgive them. It's so true that there are still people who love them. There are still people who can forgive them. So we welcome you back home anytime. We welcome you with all our hands.
The escapees that come out, they're obviously very tentative when they come out. Because in the past, the reaction from the community, the affected communities, the ones that they've attacked or terrorized in the past, their first reaction is to kill them.
The next morning, our team awoke before dawn to take a 30-minute helicopter flight to Benghazi, an area where the LRA has been, and to some degree, are still very active.
Gentlemen, you are requested to switch on your mobile phones and other electronic devices during the whole flight. For your information, this is non-smoking and non-alcoholic flight.
So how long you're going to stay?
I think we talked about being picked up at 13:20.
You must know the timing also.
Okay.
So as per DFS, I'll be arriving here at 1320.
Yeah.
Okay. Before that, I'll expect that you finish your job and come back here by 1300.
Yeah, as soon as we finish, we'll give a call to the guys.
Okay. Because I don't, it should not be like that. I'm coming waiting and you're not there. Okay?
No, of course.
Because time is calculated like that and we follow the DFS.
No problem.
Okay.
Thanks.
Our team made our way into Benghazi Center, where Tahir, our DDR man in Oriental, had arranged for us to meet with community leaders and get a better sense of the current situation on the ground.
Yeah? Yeah? Yeah, I think. Okay. Yes.
Soyez les bienvenus. Welcome.
La LRA est arrivée dans la région ici en 2004.
était basé essentiellement dans le parc national de Garamba. Nous avions remarqué aussi le passage de la LRA qui de temps en temps passait du Congo à la République centrafricaine. Selon les dires, parce que nous n'avions pas de preuves, c'était à Obo où leur chef Kony était basé. Alors les discussions de Djouba 2, où il fallait que la RRA signe la fin de ses activités. Alors, après l'échec de ces pourparlers de Djouba 2, alors c'était pratiquement l'impasse. Alors, la RRA avait refusé de cesser ses activités de rébellion. Alors, au bout de tout ça, la communauté internationale avait décidé de faire quelque chose pour essayer de démanteler la LRA.
Finally, never again is a challenge to nations. It's a bitter truth. Too often the world has failed to prevent the killing of innocents on a massive scale, and we are haunted by the atrocities that we did not stop.
What was it like before the camp here? Were there UN soldiers? Was there any sort of presence? Defensive presence? No.
There were only these Congolese soldiers, FRDC, plus UPDF, these Ugandan militaries.
Even though it's Congo,
yes,
they were over here.
Yeah. Really, there is a big change from the period the UN is here. But around the surrounding of Bangladesh, you cannot pass more than 1 to 2 days without receiving any report regarding LRA movement, abduction, killing, attack, and so on. So they are still operating and they are still active in the area.
Further evidence of LRA movement could be found in trail markers that the under-equipped rebels have been using to communicate information between their small groups.
Ils font ce signe-là, comme ça. Alors, ici, ils mettent des morceaux de bois. Ce sont des histoires. Mais l'IPDF interprète très facilement. Et il les localise vraiment à l'endroit et à temps voulu. Alors, cette opération de coup de tonnerre a fait que la LRA soit atomisée, dispersée, et finalement, elle s'est émiettée à petits groupes. Elle s'est mise à attaquer par ici, par là. Il y a eu des tueries, il y a eu des enlèvements, il y a eu des pillages, il y a eu des incendies. On a incendié des gens, des enfants avec des maisons. En tout cas, tout ce qui est atrocité possible, la RRA avait exhibé ça cette journée-là. L'élément de la RRA qui avait tiré s'était posté ici. Et puis l'homme était là. Oui. Alors l'homme avait une barre de fer qu'il avait lancée à la direction de la LRA. Oui. Alors c'est tombé ici quelque part, alors la LRA a tiré. Oui. Et il est tombé là, il est tombé sur place. Le problème, ce n'est pas lié vraiment au temps. C'est lorsqu'ils ont faim, ils viennent chercher à manger. N'importe quoi.
Au point que par exemple, comme maintenant c'est la période des arachides et des maïs, quand ils arrivent dans un champ de maïs ou des arachides, ils s'y installent pour se ravitailler un peu à vivre et parfois prendre aussi les maniocs avant de chercher comment se déplacer. Et ça un peu pour dire que pour le maïs, ils ont le problème de vivre, c'est ça qui les préoccupe.
Alors ils viennent de toutes les manières. S'ils peuvent tuer, ils tuent. Ils viennent aussi, quand ils profitent de ça, ils peuvent profiter de ça pour enlever les enfants. Oui.
Interested in hearing a first-hand account of the LRA's snatch and grab tactics in the area? Our UN handlers arranged for us to meet Bolobo, a young man who had been abducted by the LRA as a teenager and at one point had come face-to-face with the elusive Joseph Kony.
Bakila biso tokomina na popo tolali wana babominde kona biso moko na arme nde baleki na biso tokei tokomina ka nini Nigeria. Tangu tokomi na ka Nigeria tusali emwa tuleki na banga. Nde kuna nde tokendaki bakei kolakisa biso kuna Kony topesi ya mbote. Nde tangu bitumba ekomi na avion topalangani tokimi bebu. Après kokima na biso tobandi su kolia bia teka mawa. Nde sikoyo chasse yaki kosalama na ye kokima.
Il y a des rescapés qui disent qu'il leur arrive aussi de suivre ça, DDRRRR. Alors, quand ils suivent ça, il y en a parmi les LRA qui prennent la résolution de se rendre par rapport à ça. Par contre, il y a ce que j'appelle des intégristes, des traditionalistes de la rébellion.
Bapesaki nga arme metobundaki te balakisaki ata biso kobeta te po bapesi kaka biso balakisi na kofungola bona kopangusa yango mafuta suka balingaki mpe batia biso basoda nde ezalaki mpenza mposa na bango balingaki bakomisa biso basoda po bao basi baza basi na bango mpe kaka
anakata bino basi bazaki bazaki boni
bazaki ebele po mokonzi na mokonzi azapeka na mwana mwasi ono.
The amnesty law that used to allow those that came out of the LRA voluntarily a degree of amnesty has now been removed. And so that's another issue which has also been brought to the fore. This has effectively removed the best incentive we have in trying to encourage LRA combatants to come out.
Au point que ce n'était pas facile pour la population de Bangadi de voir quelqu'un qu'on appelle LRA et de voir encore à lui un homme qu'on peut réintégrer ou qu'on peut encore accepter comme un homme.
Il restait que de descendre. L'endroit ici, c'est là où, après les combats entre la population et la LRA, les corps de la LRA qui étaient récupérés étaient incinérés à cet endroit ici.
So just in the middle of the road, huh? Did you bury them after that?
Non, on incinérait jusqu'à ça, on les rendait à cendres. On rendait tous les corps à cendres.
Pourquoi?
Bon, la population se disait ce n'est pas leur sol ici, on ne peut pas les enterrer ici. Comme ça, on les incinère tout simplement. Donc il y a aussi une conception, si on laissait un cimetière quelque part, leur mentalité risque, enfin, leur esprit risque de créer d'autres situations.
For the purposes of kind of disarming these people and getting them to surrender, this ain't helping, you know?
European-style colonialism first made its way to the Congo in 1876 after famed explorer Henry Stanley, employed by Leopold II of Belgium, forced tribal chiefs to sign treaties at gunpoint that essentially granted all of their land rights to the European monarch. Until 1908, Leopold ran the Congo as the Congo Free State, a private corporation with him as the sole shareholder and as chairman. It soon became clear that the corporation's profits were built on a brutal occupation of the local people and plunder of the Congo's natural resources, namely rubber. In 1965, following a series of coups that ended the relative stability of the newly independent nation, Joseph Laurent Mobutu seized control of the state, changed the country's name to Zaire, and for over 30 years led a brutal regime built on Mobutu's own cult of personality. By way of example, under Mobutu in a children's school, Ronald Reagan would have been referred to as the American Mobutu. In May 1997, Laurent Désiré Kabila, father of the DRC's current executive Joseph Kabila, ascended to the presidency of Zaire and changed the country's name yet again to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Kabila the Elder achieved this regime change through a rebellion backed by Rwanda and Uganda, which included a grand march from the Kivus across 1,000 miles of some of the world's densest jungle. The same feat now threatened by the rebels of M23.
There's a very big difference from the work that DDR does in the Kivus to the work that they do in Oriental. Whereas in the Kivus, most of the combatants that we're trying to reach are more easily reachable. There's a mobile network system here. There's there's the possibility to reach out and discuss and try to negotiate with people to come in. That doesn't exist in Oriental. Up there, you're in the middle of the jungle. There's no mobile network. There's no contact with anybody within the LRA. There's no peace agreement. So much of the work is based a lot on the belief and the faith that the message is getting through them. There's now a new African Union initiative to implement a strategy towards countering the LRA problem. We also use our troops on the ground when they do their patrols. So we make a point of having only armed elements doing that, whether it's from our side or the FRDC.
During the patrol, we had persuaded the convoy to drop our team off in Duru, a village hit hard by the LRA's 2008 Dungu offensive. It is also where, according to local rumors, a small band of fighters have been recently raiding local farms.
There goes our convoy. There's American J-Ops special forces here who getting a little bit cagey about what they're doing. Just took off all their insignia for crossing into South Sudan, including like their even their like little flag patch, which seems a little intriguing. And there was a national policeman from Burkina Faso. He confirmed what we've kind of been picking up on this whole time. The LRA is weak and dead at this point. I think it's kind of sort of like hype driven. I think the Kony 2012 Facebook campaign thing has sort of swayed foreign policy towards sending troops here instead of like somewhere like Goma, where there's a huge buildup of M23 troops, which is basically where we're kind of needed down here. Instead of pursuing this dead sort of like starving army of 400 people who only attack at this point to get food. We'll hang out here, see how people are doing 4 years after the massacre.
Ninyi bubunzi kumona bisawa boy tozali ba traumatisé, très traumatisé. Mwana na ngai oyo lokola kutuzala boy mwana mobali mwana mwasi babu mandele mutina na misina yebo ito ko pete ne na kaka na zitazolera abantu bomoyi pe makirazo obima tangu mazobo maboyo azolera pe bango bazoseka makambo est-ce que pona kulongola ngona mutu ezalinde nyini d'après vous qui le chrétien doit pardonner, mais même qu'il y a chrétien d'autre part il doit rester comme ça et pas na bisawa yo tangisema kirana moninga na yo yeba malamu nzambe azozira yo kuna na likolo mokoromoko bakokende bakusangana bakoyeba nani azalaki na fote na kote na moninga na ye.
Ok, merci. Ici, Morton,
But some locals are going to take us down to a place called Nambia, which is like just a little village south here, and The area between it though is it's just the jungle road. And it's where the LRA likes to jump out and ambush like single cars. So local militant force has been kind enough to give us a little escort down there. Go talk to them and see what the LRA is looking like these days. We've heard isn't so hot.
Disons au cours des semaines, ou bien avant des semaines, donc les jeux là qui sortent chaque fois. Les ailes là, donc chaque fois, ils capturaient les gens, même les enfants, bon, même donc les hommes âgés, les tuer avec un coup de bâton. Ça vous m'attire jusqu'à présent, je suis aussi comme une victime, puisque mon enfant qui était à l'école, depuis on a capturé jusqu'à présent, il est connu. La situation des ailes là, c'est pour nous comme c'est la fête du monde qui vient chez nous.
C'est pas ça.
Oyo. Ekena bilamba.
Ngana longola kiao. Namukalanga. Wana kinokolanda ba makako. Tolongeda mwana nanga. Biso sona calibre. Eto kuti bango bazoyo kana zela. Moka za koya na zela.
Batali eloyo lokola soda.
Mamoni siko awa daka basona biso tuza okende kaka.
Kasi tangu bakutani na alero oyo.
Kona moni lingala wana ekesini. Kakoloba wana mbalamoko baso mi balepe babimi.
Bosisho bazalaki paka pene boye. Tangu ya pesimbo te pona bato oyo bato na biso oyo.
Disiko bayiko na biso na singa. Singa na lokito nanga na lokito na mwana singa moko.
Barubi bakanisi na motema tosha kofi.
Tukoti wana tokati semai paika oyo paika oyo daka kuna napo oike boli kolo tokati changa tobande kutambula ka zamba titi tuzokota mai po mai yango kwa kazole kabo awa ndi tokati sai
basalishi bo balambi ya rubi pona batoyo pona balera kasi ya isase pona kukosa bango bo siko bo pisi bunduki na kuranda binu nyama ba pisi bango bunduki arbi yo ko kimate ya rubite akimate barubi mwana naye abanda abo pana bisu yo moko ki
mikumba wana bazo ndege bakangaki biso singa biso mibale singa wana bakati yanga wabo moka benti machete ya miraibo alingia kwa pae nango moka lobite ko papate pekisi ya patiki mwana kandi ni singa wana lisusu
ya shay bisi pona bango soka beti bunduki akobeta ndete kuna pa soko bauki baroba ya zali abeti kuna.
Martin circled the LRA encampment at a safe distance and waited for the moon to rise. After his first shot rang out across the night sky, the LRA men, lulled into a false sense of comfort, laid down their weapons and promptly went to sleep. After the promised knock against the tree echoed in the darkness, Martin's son fled and the pair made their way safely back to the village.
And there was another request from the chief as well when we were here, that they said you'll behave if ever more FRDC soldiers could be deployed here. Because now you've got only about less than 10 that are here.
Right.
Because now the withdrawal of FRDC soldiers to North Kivu.
Right.
So they left some of the villages in vacuum, no protection at all.
In the bush, when they were moving with them, have they ever come across DDR flyers in the bush pits or DDR tracks? Papers, you know.
Omuso toleki na ngwa mona kiaka esika ba memaki ba kotaki ba yiko pomba biloko wana omuso sezala ki wana ba shibire ba chaki pe bango pe bazi batangi po baza ka tos
They saw a yellow paper, and these guys they tried to read, and then they just threw the paper, scratch it, and then they throw, and then they said, "Tell them that we shall never come out of this place."
That's pretty definitive. Almost everywhere we went, our team seemed to encounter conflicting opinions regarding the reallocation of troops and equipment across the country. Regions where the LRA were still active feared the security vacuum they had been left in by the UN and FDRC movement of troops in support of the Kivus. Back in the Kivus, for fear of showing their hand to M23, officials chose to focus on operations in provinces like Oriental while seemingly ignoring the wolf at their doorstep. It seems that both fears were well-founded.
Walk back over, everybody smoke. It's funny, I was expecting to see one in like the dog's mouth, and like the little kids. Okay, ready? Morning, we're out looking for hippos for our flight. We're leaving town today. No hippos so far. I think they might still be in the grass, which is disappointing, but also kind of an apt metaphor for the LRA up here. One thing that's sort of becoming clear, especially seeing all the NGOs here, all the UN presence, all the different agencies, Invisible Children, who are a good organization despite the fact that Kony 2012 is a fucked up piece of shit. And there's this attitude that you see with all sorts of NGOs that they have very, narrow focus. They're focused on one issue in a region, which is, the way you do things. You concentrate and you specialize, but in an area as complex as Eastern Congo, where everything's connected, you focus your troops up in the north where the LRA is. You beat them in a manner of speaking, but all they've really done is, as they keep saying, atomize the troops. They split off into little groups of 1 and 3, they hid in the bush, and now taking them down as a force is going to be impossible. It's going to take years and years and years. These guys are going to stay here, and they've reverted to like banditry. At the same time, the groups in the south, like the Mai Mai and the M23, have taken advantage of the focus of attention on LRA to build up their forces, and now they're a major threat to the Lake Kivu area.
Mimi jina langu ni Colonel Baudouin Ngaruye, niko chef d'état-major wa adjoint wa M23. Pia tumefurahia kuona na wanafunzi nao wamekuja kutupokea. Hakuna askari wa kubebesha mwalimu mizigo. Askari nafaa heshimu wa chef ambao tuko nao. Inafaa aheshimu wanafunzi. Asante. Mama anasema iko na shamba, hana jinsi ya kuilima, ikilema atafadhali akiona msaada ya jeshi inaweza kumsaidia kulima ile shamba, anaweza kushukuru Mungu. Hata adui akiatake atafuta militeri ya kwenda kupigia huruma. Leo ni vendredi. Lundi, wasoda wakamate majembe, polisi kamate majembe, shefa atakuongoza kutoka shamba au imama, waende walinde ile shamba na watoto na wameimaliza. Mama huyu kama hana mbegu. Shafu, na mabugari wananyang'anyia. Mabugari hakuna mabugari, ukisha hivi wananyang'anya mtu. Ndio bugari wanashindwa kukula mchaki abuye. Ni kitu gani? Kadorari wa kupatia kadorari. Unafurahi. Unaenda shangilia na kupiga diko.
Nashangilia sana, asante wanafanya mzuri.
Première condition pour gagner une guerre, c'est la maîtrise des terrains. Ils n'ont pas ça. Ni toutes les armées du monde n'ont pas ça. Réussir à infiltrer cette armée, qui est une armée, malgré tout, l'armée de la... Aucune force au monde ne saura nous déloger de là où nous sommes. Même pendant 40 ans, c'est une erreur de penser que les résoudre ces problèmes de Nord Kivu ou du Sud Kivu par la force militaire. C'est impossible.
Et si la communauté internationale vous demandait de vous retirer, vous pouvez vous retirer facilement.
Ils l'ont déjà demandé.
You know, day by day we can solve one piece at a time, and there's no real way to do that. It's you know, solutions will come, like the situation will improve eventually, but this is 20 years of war. That shit lingers. That shit's part of you know, people take it in and becomes part of their lives. War and retribution and the cycles of continue it and make it worse are part of life here. Like, this camp's gonna be here for a while. These soldiers are all gonna be here for a while. People are gonna be fighting and dying for a long fucking time, no matter, you know, how many people sign a Facebook petition.
Kana wajene gaoling, wululu bogalambini nenki wai. Kana wajene gaoto, wululu bogalambini nenki wai. Kana wajene gaoling, abogalambini nenki wai. Kana wajene gaoling, wululu bogalambini nenki wai. Kana wajene gaoto, wululu bogalambini nenki wai. Kana wajene gaoling, abogalambini nenki wai. Kana wajene gaoling, wululu bogalambini nenki wai. Kana wajene gaoto, wululu bogalambini nenki wai. Kana wajene gaoling, abogalambini nenki wai. Kana wajene gaoling, wululu bogalambini nenki wai. Kana wajene gaoto, wululu bogalambini nenki wai. Kana wajene gaoling.
Enchanté.
Oui, c'est vrai.